All right, welcome into another video. Get ready to watch me live struggle and agonize over making decisions on this upcoming NFL season. If you didn't see my last video, I predicted the entire regular season, and now we're going to get into playoff predictions for next year. And at the same time, I might throw in some award bets. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what my predictions looked like from the last video, and we're going to make these decisions live. So here we go. Make this full screen. So this is what the wild card round looks like. Don't forget that the one seeds are the Eagles and the Chiefs. So obviously they're not going to be here. So we get a rematch in the wild card round of when the Texans demolished the Browns. And this matchup is going to look a little bit different. Hypothetically, it's going to be Deshaun Watson and not Joe Flacco. This is going to be a home game for the Texans, which it was in that game last year as well. I think the Texans have gotten better, and I think, they'll be. I predicted them to go 11-6 next year, which is great, but I think people might be, predicting them to be at the very, very top of the AFC. Um, so this is going to be difficult, but I'm going to side with the home team here. It's going not going to be easy, not going to be an easy game, but I think the Texans. Oh, but the thing that gets to me is the Browns pass rush is so good, and Texans' one weakness is kind of that offensive line. They might have Nick Chubb in this game. This is a true toss-up, but I'm just going to go with the home team and the Texans. Following this game, Bengals Dolphins. Is this the year that the Dolphins kind of put it together come playoff time? This is gonna be a home game in Cincinnati? Joe Burrow. I'm gonna be trusting Joe Burrow in the playoffs in that one. I'm sorry. Jets Ravens. As a Ravens fan, I really want to be picking the Ravens in this, but I really fear that Ravens offensive line versus that Jets defensive line. We've seen a little bit of Lamar playoff struggles in the past, and now he's going up against a great defense. They're not playing at home. I think the Ravens tend to thrive when they're more of an underdog, but I'm going to go with the Jets. So I guess that's three home wins in a row. Really think the Browns could win that game, but oh my gosh. The Texans have just gotten overall better, and I think come to this point, they'll be firing on all cylinders. So I'm going to stay with the Texans there. But we're definitely going to get a away win here with the Packers versus the Falcons. Uh, I think the Packers are just overall way better team than the Falcons, and they're going to be very scary next year. I keep saying it. They're so well rounded. Jordan Love is him, and I'm going to take the Packers. And then Lions at home against the Cowboys is an easy pick for me. I think the Lions are such a better team than the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys, I have them at 11 wins. I think they're going to be successful next year, but they haven't gotten, substantially better than last year, and they're going to have the same struggles when it comes to crunch time that they seem to always have. So Lions, I think, win that game with ease. And then this game is really interesting. Niners, Rams, McVay versus Shanahan, and I think the Rams would put up a fight in this game. Just schematically, they're going to just scheme their ass off, but their defense, I think, would just get demolished by the Niners, and the Niners are going to be in a positive game script. If they get the ball first, I bet they go down and run the ball right down their throat and score. And I think the Niners are just too good of a team. So those are the picks there. I guess before moving on to that, I should probably pick some awards. Um, so as far as MVP, I have the Chiefs at 16-1. If they go 16-1, Mahomes is going to win MVP. But that 16-1, I kind of talked about it in the last video. I'm not really predicting them to go 16-1. It's more that I think, you know, they're probably like in a power rankings kind of situation going to be my number one team. So when I'm picking game by game, they're going to be the best team in every single game. I think the one loss I had was at San Francisco, and they could even easily win that game. I'm not predicting them to only have one loss. So this is like a little inflated. But I think the Eagles have a legit chance to have like a 15-2 record. And if they do that, I think Jalen Hurts would win MVP. So with that receiving core, AJ Brown, um, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, that great offensive line, and now Saquon Barkley, who I think is going to have an amazing year. I think there's a chance Jalen Hurts can win MVP and Saquon Barkley could win Offensive Player of the Year, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and say that already. I think Rodgers is a lock for Comeback Player of the Year, especially if they're the 2 seed. There's no way he doesn't win that. Um, Defensive Player of the Year, uh, that's kind of a more tough one. I think, you know, there's a legit chance that I think Aiden Hutchinson could win it. Lions this having this high of a record, he if he gets, 20 sacks. But, you know, pretty clearly the guys that are always in it are going to be Myles Garrett. He could very well win it again. TJ Watt's always going to be in it. I'm going to give it to a new guy. I think there's always voter fatigue, and everyone's going to be on the Lions train next year. They have 13 wins, win the North, and Aiden Hutchinson has 18, 19, 20 sacks. I think he could win it. So I'm actually going to say Aiden Hutchinson there. And then the last thing I have to solidify on, kind of going on the fly right here, but just based on these standings, who's going to win Offensive Player of the Year? I think if Jamar Chase plays week one, he could always be an option up there. I don't think any one person on the Chiefs is going to, get that. Obviously, McCaffrey is always, in that mix. But I mean, the only I don't think there's one person on the Packers that's going to stand out enough to win Offensive Player of the Year. I think Tyreek Hill is always an option. A sneaky one is if Derrick Henry, you know what I think I'm going to say this. Obviously, this stuff is just a crapshoot. I think the Hurts and Saquon kind of the MVP and Offensive Player of the Year thing is like could be real. If you know uh, Saquon Barkley, I think he's just going to dominate behind the offensive line. But I'm going to go a sneaky Derrick Henry on the Ravens. I think in that offense, although I'm a little worried about the offensive line, I think Derrick Henry could end up with, 13, 1,400 yards, but also like 25 rushing touchdowns. And if he does that, I think the Ravens have been running a lot of outside zone, which what Derrick Henry is very good at, but also kind of that downhill ISO stuff. And I think he's just going to be so much more talented than Gus Edwards has ever been. And we've seen Gus Edwards have double-digit touchdowns. Why can't Derrick Henry have 20? And I think if that happens, he's got a shot. So I'm going to say Derrick Henry, Offensive Player of the Year. Aiden Hutchinson, Defensive Player of the Year. Jalen Hurts, MVP, Comeback Player of the Year. Aaron Rodgers, book it. Anyway, we're moving on to the divisional round. And we got some great matchups here. So starting off hot, Jets, Bengals. I think Joe Burrow and Aaron Rodgers, uh, I could see them having like similar career paths. Aaron Rodgers is more physically talented than Joe Burrow, but I think and Aaron Rodgers has got an elite processor. Joe Burrow also has that elite processor. And they're very similar athletically, I think. Like they can move around a little bit more than you'd think, and they have great pocket awareness. Um, I think the Jets defense is a lot better than the Bengals defense, and I'm going to be taking the Jets at home. I think, you know, Rodgers, this is all assuming he stays healthy, and I think that is a bigger chance of happening, him staying healthy, than people are willing to admit. And if he does that, the Jets are going to be so good, and people just keep trying to ignore that. But I'm taking the Jets, and I think Rodgers in that playoff scenario, I'm going to have a lot of faith in him to, go have a game-winning drive, go set up a game-winning field goal. And when their defense is that good, I'm going to trust him in crunch time. This is a very tough game, and the Bengals are a great team. But, their biggest strength is that Burrow, Higgins, Chase kind of plethora of weapons on offense, and the Jets have the ability to slow that down with, Sauce Gardner and whatnot. So I'm going with the Jets. And then Texans, Chiefs. The Texans have a better roster on paper than the Chiefs, I think. Um, I mean, that's arguable. The Chiefs, lose L'Jarius Sneed, still have a great defensive roster, great defensive coaching. I think what this is going to come down to is Patrick Mahomes and the best coaching staff in the NFL versus a young CJ Stroud, and they're an up-and-coming team, and this is going to be another successful year, but it's not quite their time to go into Arrowhead and win. We saw Joe Burrow do that a couple years ago, but I don't think that's going to happen here. I'm going to take it the Chiefs. So then we got Niners Lions, another rematch, right? So strengths and weaknesses. The Lions have maybe the best offensive line in the NFL. Probably it's between them and maybe like the Eagles, um, which will definitely slow down that kind of chaotic Niners defense. The Niners do have, Fred Warner and some great safeties that'll, help shut down the middle of the field, which is where the Lions love to operate with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta. But the Lions were very, very good last year, and I don't know if people realize how much better they got in terms of revamping the secondary entirely. If they can keep DJ Reader healthy enough and they have him come playoff time, that could slow down the Niners. This is a real toss-up. I mean, technically the Niners are at home in this. I think the Lions are going to be great all year. Um, but I really think for the Niners, it's kind of this year, and they're going to take a step back next year when they have to pay Purdy and start losing some guys. And I think what's going to kill them is this is such a toss-up. The thing about the Niners is their offensive line outside of Trent Williams is awful, but it gets completely covered up by the brilliance of Kyle Shanahan with their run game and their run scheme and the way they scheme people open. That's why they're so good every single year, no matter who their quarterback is, and they can just go and play and get ahead of people and run the offense. But when it comes playoff time and you're playing against a really, really good team that is throwing everything in the kitchen sink at being able to stop what you're going to scheme up, eventually it comes down to just like in the playoffs, straight up football. Who can move who can't move who is going to make one guy miss, who's not going to. And what that means for a team with a bad offensive line, obviously outside of Trent Williams, is eventually it's going to be 3rd and 8 in a close game and you have to go make a play. And this, I kind of talked about it in my prediction thing with the last video with the Niners, is eventually it's going to be 3rd and 8 and you have to drop back and you have to make a throw. And this is not actually a shot at Brock Purdy. This is simply the fact that he has to be so perfect. Like, yes, his job is so easy because he has the weapons and the coaching staff and the scheme. But in that exact scenario where it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, and you have to make a play, they're going to have no time to throw the ball because they're going to have 4 guys with a very high chance of just losing immediately. So I think that's why I'm going to pick the Lions, which is going to be so tough for the Niners to then lose here and then have to pay Purdy and maybe lose Debo. They just paid Ayuk and all this. This shouldn't be a reflection that I don't think they can go all the way and win the Super Bowl, or to the Super Bowl again or anything like that. But I think that's just kind of like a fatal flaw when you get really down to it, where it's hard to predict them to be exactly that perfect all the way through the playoffs. I feel like it's kind of this year or never with the way they're currently structured. But I guess I'm not picking it to happen. I think the Lions are just kind of set up a little bit better. That's what I'm going to say. And then Packers, Eagles. I keep saying it. I love Jordan Love. I've been the biggest supporter of him. I was a supporter of him during the draft. When they drafted him, I had my criticisms like everyone else because of the whole Rodgers thing. But I was saying at the end of the day, like, I love Jordan Love. And I can't really hate on the pick that much because of how much I believe in him. And that the way that panned out is actually why, when I also really liked Michael Penix, why I didn't, crush a team like the Falcons and actually supported them putting that much capital, draft capital, taking that risk on a quarterback, even though he might sit 1, 2, maybe 3 years. But the Packers are extremely well rounded. They're great coaching, but I think the Eagles at this point, the young corners are maybe more up to speed, and they'd be playing really great. And that offensive line, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, I think is going to be a tandem that at some point is just going to be kind of unstoppable. And they'll be playing this game at home. This should not be a reflection on the Packers not being able to go further than this, but I'm going to be taking the Eagles. So then we get to the conference championship. Here we go. So we have kind of Rodgers, kind of last chance to get a Super Bowl with a great defense, on paper, a great offensive line, some good weapons. Can they slow down Pat Mahomes with that defense? I think the Chiefs are, have a little bit more weaponry on offense, but like I said, they lost L'Jarius Sneed. Repeating, getting to the Super Bowl 3 years in a row, like everything to just stay intact enough. I'm going to be taking the Jets. And, I wish I could have some elite analysis on why they're definitely going to beat the Chiefs, but I don't. When it gets to this point, it's kind of just a toss-up. There's going to be 4 amazing teams. I think the Jets defense would be able to do enough to slow down Pat Mahomes, where it's going to come down to, can Aaron Rodgers lead the team down the field? And I think, given his resume, his experience, if he's healthy and he's in that game, they have the personnel to be able to go do that. And I'm going to be sending the Jets to the Super Bowl. And then we have Eagles-Lions. In my opinion, the 2 best teams in the NFC. I know that technically the Niners have one more win, but that's just kind of like scheduling semantics. This would be a complete toss-up once again. These are, like I said at the top of this, gives me agony to even decide these things because it's almost impossible. When I think about this matchup, the Lions do have a revamped secondary, but I don't think it is great by any means. It's good with the potential to be very good with some young players like Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw. But I think A.J. Brown could dominate in that matchup, and Devontae Smith. They both have great offensive and defensive lines. It's a complete toss-up. I think the Eagles are a little bit better by the tiniest bit, and they're playing at home. So I'm going to have a Jets-Eagles Super Bowl. And before I started this, I knew this is where I was going to end up, right? But I haven't exactly decided who I think is going to win. This isn't going to say this. I think, given the circumstances of everything, statistically, the Eagles probably have a better chance of getting to here. So I could just play the math game and say I'm going to pick the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. This would technically be an MVP. Then I'm picking in Jalen Hurts to win a Super Bowl, which we all know is very rare. That's only happened once, right? That when Mahomes did it, right? Right? Because it never happened before that, I think. I don't know. So let's look at this matchup. The first thing I always look at when I think about a matchup is the offensive versus defensive lines. Both of these teams have great offensive and defensive lines. The Jets, on paper, have a great offensive line, I should say. Obviously, with Tyron Smith versus rookie Olu Fashanu, you're going to say they have a great offensive line with Tyron Smith, and then John Simpson, who's a decent player, young good center, and Joe Tippmann. You're kind of banking on a little bit of development there. Elijah Vera Tucker, who is injury prone himself, I should say, and then Morgan Moses. With Olu Fashanu being that ultimate kind of swing tackle depth piece. Versus a defensive line for the Eagles, which has newly traded for Bryce Huff, Brandon Graham, and then obviously they have Jalen Carter and bro, I did the same thing where I can't think of names in this last video. The massive defensive tackle from Georgia. I don't know why the heck I can't think of his name. And Josh Sweat. Great defensive line, and they're very deep. They got who am I thinking? Milton Williams, right? I think the Eagles have a little bit of an advantage there. Their linebackers are horrible, which you have to think about in a matchup versus Aaron Rodgers. If he can take advantage of, Devin White, you're like blitzing like crazy and being an idiot. The Eagles secondary is good. Darius Slay is good, not great now as a number one corner. He was great, but he's just old. He's like 33. And then they're really counting on Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper Dijon, and their the rest of their secondary. So, and then obviously the Jets have probably the best secondary in the NFL. Versus the Eagles, who have a little bit better weapons than the Jets. But I also trust Aaron Rodgers a little bit more in a completely drop back passing game. The Jets have amazing linebackers, which would be very difficult for the Eagles, who, have this great running game. Maybe that gets slowed down. Wow, this is a difficult decision. The Eagles have an absolutely elite roster that was held back by some bad coaching last year. And now they have, at the very least, average coaching between Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. And that's been my take on them, is that as long as they can get average coordinator coaching, that they would be a Super Bowl contender. The Jets feel like they have such high upside, which has a better chance of happening than people are giving them credit for, in my opinion. But will they hit that upside? At this point, I really have to make a decision about who I think is going to win the Super Bowl. And I think at this point, if both of these teams got here, I'm going to pick the Eagles. And that feels horrible because I think the Jets have it in them. But I'm going to pick the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. And I guess you can call me a massive Jets and Eagles supporter this year. So, go roast me in the comments. Go, say I'm an idiot for having the Jets in the Super Bowl, and that's the craziest thing ever. Or call me an idiot and saying that I think Jalen Hurts is going to win MVP this year. But these are my predictions. As kind of a flip side to all of this, here's the draft order. With the Commanders getting the first overall pick, they should probably take that tackle from LSU that's supposed to be good next year. And the Saints should be doing everything they can to get out of the Derek Carr situation because they're just the quarterbacks are just getting better every day and passing up Derek Carr, and the Saints are just have no forward momentum and no money and kind of screwed. And the Giants should try to take a quarterback, I guess. And the Patriots will be set up nice, and maybe the Raiders can find a quarterback and get ready for the Cardinals to be really good in the future. I think they got one more year and they could go for it all. And the Jags are firing Doug Peterson. Those are my predictions for the year. I'll leave it at that. I want to try and, come out with these videos on a weekly basis. I want to have some vlogs, day in the life type of stuff with my fitness content and diet content and marathon content. And I want to get back into bodybuilding. I have a lot of content, that I want to produce. And, but sports fit in there somehow. And I'm going to make it happen. So I hope you guys enjoyed. hit that like button, comment, call me an idiot, and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, those are my predictions. Peace out.